on this computer. Okay, I think I'm recording. Yes. And so what I'd like to do to begin is I would just, there's no particular order, and I know that each of you probably want to jump in, but can you start by just sharing big picture, what you guys were doing in Liberia? I remember, just to remind you, I know a lot of the folks that are here right now probably have a good idea of what you were doing, but we're going to end up sharing this link with the rest of the church. And so for everybody in the church, I'd love for someone or a few folks to really just share, what is the mission? What are you doing out there? Who are our partners out there? And kind of what were you doing out there?
All right,
Zach, you want to take this?
Yeah, I'll take this one. All right, so we go to Liberia, West Africa. This is the third time that we've been able to bring a team from Park. Katie and I lived there for a few years, and then 3 years ago we started bringing. They are medical teams as well as some people that work at the school, which is awesome that we're able to do both. We're able to, what we do is we're assisting the clinic that we started up there, and then also assisting the school, doing like teacher tutoring, child tutoring there at the school, and then we did some more community outreaches this year, which was awesome. At the clinic, we see anywhere from 80 to 160 people a day. And, we're treating everything from malaria to pneumonia to typhoid to ear infections. So it's a pretty broad range, and something that we've emphasized, especially the last 2 years, is praying with every patient. And so the ministry that we go over with is Light Evangelism Ministry. It's a nationally run organization, so it's run by Liberians. The people that we're going over to support are Liberians. So there's some good and bad with that, but mostly good. We just have to be really flexible with cultural differences and things like that. But overall, it's been a huge blessing. And we also there's like an orphanage dormitory as well on campus. And so we, when we're done at clinic and school, then we spend some time hanging with the kids and going out into the community. So that's kind of big picture.
Anyone else want to jump in there? And maybe a follow-up question would be on this particular kind of section is, give me like an average day. So, what does an average day look like for you when you guys are out there? You just mentioned a number of different things that you do, and when the clinic closes, you spend time with the kids. But like, walk me through a day. What does it look like? Or is there an average day?
Allison, go.
Yeah, someone go.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go and share kind of the clinic side, but I'm going to let Kyle and Anna then share about like the school, what that looks like. So as a team, in the morning, like getting up, having a devotional together, breaking bread, eating in the morning, and then headed out, going to like the school. Our school team goes out, and then the rest of us go to the clinic. There's not really a standard of like how the day goes, I think, after that, except like, so up for probably 2-3 hours before we even get to the clinic, people have been coming waiting in the waiting area outside in the heat and with their families, and they're waiting to be seen, and they're being registered by like the nurses and like the help that's there, and getting like their vital signs and things like that. And the nurses and like someone from our team will do a devotional over everyone that's waiting, and then pray with everyone, and then kind of give everyone like kind of the lay of the land on how clinic runs. And then the day just goes from there. And we just see that, I mean, we have like a flow of like the people that we see in like number order and everything, but then critical cases come, and a lot of times that happens more often than not, and you just pull those people in and those kids, and you just have to see them right then. And then we stop when the last patient leaves. So yeah, if they keep coming and more critical patients come, like we're there and we keep working. So, and Anna and Kyle, most of the time we're at the school, but they were amazing, and the past 2 years have been phenomenal. And like being able to come over after school's out to help us run labs and literally see patients do anything that is needed, and it was phenomenal. And that also goes for Mariah too. She's great. So yeah, anyone else want to add?
Yeah, so Kyle and I didn't really have a typical day this year. But like Allison said, it was definitely all hands on deck with the clinic when needed. But we really tried to focus this year on the school and growing the relationships there with the teachers through some workshops. We focused on phonics this year and how to engage students using only ourselves and the chalkboard. So that was a lot of fun. And then we also did a lot of tutoring for all different areas and spent a lot of time in the village. So we tried to do a little bit more kind of focus on evangelism as we could with the time that we had. And so we'd go into the village and just kind of pray over, whoever we saw and just let God lead us. And it led to some really great conversations this year. So we're really happy about that.
It's so great. So I'm trying to get a picture of this for those who have never been there. It's a ministry, there's a school, there's a clinic. And are these run, there's a church connected into this? And can you walk me through the whole organization and how this all fits together and what it's like out there?
Since you want to talk about this a little bit, I'm going to look for a photo.
Sure. So it's all on one campus, and so basically the main city closest to us is Monrovia, and it's about, how far would you say it is outside of that? Hour to an hour and a half maybe outside of that. And so we're in a pretty rural area in Africa. And so really it's, if you can imagine just going down this road, I think Zach's going to find a photo to kind of put it up and screen share. But there's I think God used Zach and his wife a few years ago to kind of start the whole thing from the ground up. And so I think what a lot of people don't know is that God really used him to actually build it with his hands. And so he was very involved with kind of building the actual clinic, building the rooms, the design of it, and kind of really fostering that. And so it's just been a blessing, I think, to see how that's evolved now to be kind of a yearly a trip and investment there. With the actual campus itself, so if you can imagine a school setting, a clinic, and then kind of a guest house, and then a orphanage basically of where a lot of orphans stay. That's basically the four buildings on campus. And then there's kind of another cement in building that's used as the church and for the kind of the community there. And so I'm not sure, did you find a picture, Zach? You're on mute.
Okay, thank you. I'm struggling. I'm working on it. It's coming.
I think for you to show, I'm going to have to make you the host. I could be wrong on that.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
So when you're
I
ready.
can just bring it up. Would it work if I bring it up on my...
What, you're just going to put it in front of the camera like that for us?
Yeah, let me try that. It'll be like Africa. All right.
So wait, while you're trying to do that, since just to clarify, so Zach and Katie, you were there. How long ago were you there? You were there full time for how many years?
2 years.
So you were there for 2 years.
Yep.
And when you were there, the clinic, the medical site was not up yet, if I'm understanding Censor yet.
Correct. So when we
and was was the school up yet either?
The school was up. The first 3 months we finished building the school, and then after that we built the clinic. Katie started the school about 3 months after we got there and hired the teachers and all that. Well, we built the clinic and then hired some staff, and yeah.
So when you say built, are we talking like you laid the stone, or what are we talking?
As in it was just jungle and we cut down the jungle and burned it down and built. Yeah.
Okay. This is the kind of backstory that's good for us to like get a full picture of how this all fits together.
All right, here.
Can I add something to that as they're talking?
Please.
So something, having been on this trip for 3 years, I think has been one of the like most impactful things. I think has been getting to see above all like God's faithfulness through these trips, but even in addition to that, like seeing Zach and Katie's faithfulness almost 10 years ago in their devotion to the community there of coming to this country where they didn't know anyone and starting out with the school and like hiring teachers and staff, and then this clinic literally building it from the ground up for almost 3 years doing that. And then there's the picture.
There's the clinic.
And being able to see that because of that, because they're like their commitment to the community and investing in those relationships and loving those people so well in that community, that we're now able to go back. And 3 years ago, we weren't supposed to go to Liberia. We were supposed to go to Togo. And a month before the trip happened, God was like, psych, we're not doing that. So we ended up in Liberia, and it just has been so cool to be like, the entire time God has wanted us in Liberia, and it is because of what he grew through Zach and Katie and in this ministry. And so I think that's so cool to be able to help build on top of what God started in them and in their ministry there so many years ago. So just wanted to add that part.
Well, I love that too. I love just hearing how God redirected plans, right? It's I think God all the time, there's a pastor at Park who says God directs, redirects, and shipwrecks. And if you go through Acts, that seems to be what God does. He directs, he redirects, and then he shipwrecks those plans, and you find out on the other side of the shipwreck, there's so much fruit to be had. And so that's a good reminder of your guys' faithfulness years ago as well. And what is that we're looking at there, Zach?
This one is a picture of the school, and that's the kids outside for like morning assembly.
Okay.
So it gives you an idea. The second floor is all new there, which is really cool to see. They are building that second floor because that's the high school. It started when Katie started the school. It started with 12, and there's now 460, and all 12 grades. So God has really blessed it.
Wow. Now, question, just can we go across the team? What was your experience with global missions, short or long term? So just kind of briefly, just so we kind of get a sense of the team and who's heading out there before you went on this trip. Was this something you guys were familiar with, or walk us through. So Zach and Katie, you were there full time before going on these short-term trips kind of regularly. But how about the rest of the team? What was your engagement with global missions before this?
I can say this is primarily true for both of us, but Anna and I had done missions, short-term missions trips. I think Anna's latest one previous to that was in college, and I did some in high school. And so I actually thought that I would have a little bit more familiarity with what I was walking into, but I think partially because Africa and Liberia is a pretty unique place, but also I found that just going as an adult just made the trip entirely different than when I was in high school and younger. And a lot more, I shouldn't say more, but just impactful in a very different way because, we really rallied together as a team. It wasn't like Zach came in and had perfect schedule and told us all what to do, right? Like we were really together as a team, accomplishing this and building the relationships. And I don't know, I just walked away impacted differently from in that regard.
That's good. Anna, same with you?
Yeah, he covered it.
Okay, got it. How about the rest of the team?
I had gone to Liberia in 2018 with the team, and then had previously done a few other medical trips short term. But one thing that I think really stands out about the trip to Liberia is that you really get the ability to like fully immerse in the community, which is really different than most trips. I feel like a majority of other times that you do, especially medical trips, you're frequently like kind of in the community for like the medical portion of the day and kind of outside of it for the rest of it. And in this trip specifically, you really like, you're present with the kids, especially the kids that are they're like what they call dorms. We would probably refer to it closer to like an orphanage, and the school kids, and with everything being right there, you're super immersed within it. And so you really get a different sense of community than I've ever seen on any other trip, which I think really brings it really home to you. And like, you really feel like what you're developing there is so much more long-term. Like you feel like what you're creating there and the relationships you're building are really like long lasting, opposed to just being so short-term minded that a lot of like mobile medical clinics can feel like a lot of times.
That's good. Anybody else from the trip? What was your engagement with Global before heading on this? I think it's good for our folks who are going to be watching this later. At Park, we have such a strong emphasis on global. We have this, desire to send off 100 full-time workers overseas. And a big part of that is then sustaining our global partnerships and giving people a heart for global, but also making sure our short-term trips that head out are meaningful and impactful. And I know for a lot of folks engaging in kind of trips like this across Park sometimes is kind of it's a massive step of faith. It's always a big step of faith. And so I think it's just good just to see like what the different backgrounds are, and that people are coming from different places. And sometimes it's new, sometimes it's something that's been done many times before. So anybody else, what was your engagement with before heading on this trip?
I can
I
share.
just want to quickly add, sorry. I misspoke in that Anna and I both went on this trip a year previous. So in that sense, we had that experience. But I wanted to bring that up because, Rafe, you talked about the importance of global, both in the long term and the short term. And I can say, and I know Allison and others who went multiple times would agree, like there's significance and importance in returning, if you can, at least returning as a church. That made a huge difference, and we really felt that like subsequent years, just the bigger impact we were able to make.
Yeah, that's a huge point, both for global ministry and for local ministry in the city. When you're developing ministries, the more you can have, repeated touch points where it's not just kind of in and out, but actually you create relationships over the long haul. There's such power in that. And that's one of the real compelling things about this trip to Liberia. Someone else was about to share a minute ago.
That's me. I had been on like short-term mission trips before as well, but I would say they were more in like high school and like college. And they were with my family, so I had never been on a trip kind of without a family member, without knowing people super well. So it's definitely a step out of my comfort zone. And then this was obviously my first year going on the trip, so everybody else but me and Kim hadn't been, so I can just testament to like the relationship that the other team members have built. It was really cool to see like people remembered them and like people from the school, and I felt like they truly were friends. So that was just really cool to be able to like step into and see the relationships that were already developing, and then for me to kind of jump in and try to join in on those relationships was cool.
So I know you guys have shared a number of stories already just through the Facebook group, and I've been seeing some stories. I got an update from Katie while you were over there, and I was hearing that I think you guys were pulling like James Bond, Mission Impossible type maneuvers, getting through rivers and things like that. And I see people chuckling because I think it's partially true. But yeah, I would love, can you guys share some of your stories from this time? I just, I think it's so good. It's so good for our hearts to hear what God is doing in contexts outside of our own. Sometimes you get your little tunnel vision, and that's good. And, God's called us where we are, and we need to be intentional where we are. But sometimes, just to get on the ground stories of what God is up to around the globe, and the ways he's working, I think it just unlocks our tunnel vision and opens us up to the ways God could be working in our lives if we had a bigger vision. So share with us, what are some, if you could go around and a few people share, what'd you see God do? What were some of the stories you'd love to share with your church?
All right, well, I'll share first because there's a story that always comes to mind when I get a chance. And we were, I think it was the Friday that we were there, and there was a lot of sick kids that day, like a ton of sick kids. And it felt like one after another, one after another. And there was a very sick one that we were caring for, and he kind of came in not very responsive. He wasn't, acting the way that he should. Even when they got his IV, he didn't cry, like those kind of things. So it was pretty worrying. And AJ called us all in to pray for him. So we all prayed for him. And then we finished and we moved on to the next kid. And as we were working on an IV on the next kid, like a 2-day-old, the mom started talking, and we look over, and the boy that we had prayed for had woken up and was nursing and was like just that quick. And as we continued to work throughout the day, we heard the moms of the kids that we were taking care of. They were saying like, wow, these people really pray. These people believe in prayer. They believe that God's the one that's going to heal them. All these things that they were saying that, we were telling them these things, but then they were talking to each other about it. Like, wow, did you see him pray for that boy? Did you see him pray? And just to see God answer prayer, and then to also see him get the glory. That's one of my favorite stories.
I love that. I think that's a theme I continue to hear from this trip and from this team, is that you start the day with devotionals. You begin with, there's an intentional saturation of prayer, and then you get to pray for every patient. That's pretty incredible.
Kind of just to piggyback off of that, I think that as a whole, we really wanted to make sure we are emphasizing to the people that we are treating in Liberia. There's kind of like a cultural barrier in this clinic runs year round, but when we're there, we're able to kind of like drop the prices a little bit because we're helping support to pay for the medicine and all that stuff. So we have a lot of patients, but we really want to make sure that they're still coming back to the clinic when the Liberian nurses who run the clinic year round are there. And so we really wanted to make an emphasis on that. It's not us coming from the US to heal them, and it's not our medicine that comes that's any different. It's the Lord that does all of the healing with them. And so that was a huge emphasis behind praying with every patient, is making sure that God was getting the glory in that. And I think that when we ended up, because of a change of like events, we ended up being able to go to church with all of the Liberians in the community on Sunday morning, which actually wasn't even originally going to be part of that day. And we had invited a lot of patients to church with us because we were like, hey, we really believe that this is God who's healing you. It has nothing to do with any of us. And then a lot of the church was filled with people who still had IVs in their arms, who were like praising the Lord right next to us, alongside us, and giving God all the glory for their healing. And that was, wow, I think, just a moment where we were like, okay, they're getting it. Like, they got it, that it wasn't to do with us. It was always about the Lord, and it was God who healed them. And Zach did a great job of, especially with some of the sick babies that we had, sharing the gospel and being like, the next time that you think something is too hard, remember that God healed your child. And like, really like, it was a huge emphasis, especially that I'd really never seen before, and just making sure that people were understanding that it was the Lord who was doing all of the healing, who was greater than all the medicine we could ever do. And it really felt like the Liberians were like totally understanding that, like so much more than I think that we even in the US sometimes get that, especially in the middle of a pandemic. And so that was a huge praise to the Lord too. That was a huge answered prayer too, because that was always our prayer going into the trip as well.
Wow.
We have a story that's really special to us. After last year, God just laid a couple specific people on our hearts that we've been praying for, and just thinking about them a lot, and like how, you know, when we go back, we might be able to talk with them or minister to them more. And one of them was this little boy. He's 10 years old. His name was Ernest. And we got there and we were really sad because he wasn't around. Like the year before, he was just always like with us. He didn't live in the dorm or go to the school, but he was just like always around. Anyway, he wasn't. And we asked a lot of people about him, and like no one seemed to know who he was. So we were really bummed because we thought we would get a chance to talk to him. So on Wednesday, he showed up out of the blue.
That's like halfway through.
Yeah, so halfway through the trip, he showed up out of the blue, and we had brought him a Bible. So Kyle grabbed him and sat down with him and started talking with him, and you tell the rest.
Yeah, so this was cool to see how God was able to use me in that situation, despite kind of lack of confidence in myself, in all honesty. But, you know, like I said, leading up to the trip, we really wanted to put an emphasis on evangelism and like be bold in that way. And so we were looking for those opportunities. And, but it, you know, it's a little bit scary, right? Like getting into those conversations can be. So basically the way it happened is we gave him this Bible, and Mark, the Liberian director of the ministry there, was kind of in earshot. And I prayed with Ernest, but I was kind of shying away from just like sharing the gospel with him and in that moment. And I thank God for Mark, because Mark pulled him over and asked him a couple questions about his faith. And then he looks at me and he's like, all right, Kyle's going to go and tell you more about that. So he gave me that nudge I needed. But yeah, so him and I spoke for a while, and it was all God, because I was not, you know, as prepared, you know, as I would have liked, or, you know, and I was uncomfortable at times. But at the same time, it felt like I had developed a deep enough understanding of their culture to help kind of navigate through the conversation, because they have a lot of like prosperity gospel and things there. So just understanding like how they kind of twist the gospel and helping them understand it correctly. And then at the end, before he, you know, accepted Christ, I was able to use a story that kind of, I feel like God brought to me, which was basically, he was talking about how if his mom, we were talking about sin, and he was saying his mom would use the latch, like the switch, you know, spank him, basically whip him with these sticks, which is common in Liberia. And so I used that as an analogy for Christ, and was basically like, because I knew he had a little sister, and I was like, imagine your little sister, you know, your mom's upset with you for doing something, but your little sister steps in and was like, give me the latch instead of Ernest, and like she takes that punishment. And so that, I think, really helped him like finally get the key element there. And so yeah, so he accepted Christ, and we had a blast celebrating with him. And
now he calls Kyle Uncle Kyle.
Yeah, I love that. What a great story. Now wait, that it was the same. Sorry, just to make sure I understood the story, it was the same student, or the young man who you knew from the year before, who showed up in the middle of the week?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Thanks for sharing that. Can we get a few more? What were some of the things that you will take away, and maybe just from your own heart, to encourage the rest of the church and share some kind of on the ground stories with the rest of the body?
So this story, I just think is like a fun story of like kind of connecting the 2 years, I think. And this is actually Sensor had this experience, but and pulled other people into this. But he was seeing a patient, and Censor, feel free to like chime in if I mess this up, but he was seeing a patient, and it was his mom and her baby, and he didn't recognize her, and was like talking to her about questions and all this stuff, and like figuring out what was going on with her. And I don't know if he went to go get like a test cup or whatnot and like bring it back, and she like so when we were there, we have like a Polaroid camera, and we like take pictures so people can keep the pictures. And she apparently put a Polaroid on like on the desk, and Censor saw it and was like, what? And it was actually, this is like the mom and the baby that we delivered last year. And she was like, this is the picture we took, like, you guys took of us after I gave
way.
baby. I just thought that was really cool. Like, and so everyone who like had been there last year came over and like took a picture, and it was just really cool to be like, wait, you guys came back? Like, this is the baby we delivered. Like, what? It was just really cool.
That's miraculous in and of itself, because Polaroids fade pretty quickly. I'm kidding.
True.
What a cool story. Well, it just shows how much you meant to her, and also just that you went back, and that she was able to spot you, and it was a part of her heart. That was good.
Also, I know Censor tried what? Sorry.
Didn't she take like a cab all the way across town or something when she heard you guys were gonna be back, so that she could show you guys?
Yeah, she came quite the distance, and it was pretty funny because I had no recollection of her, but the photo had us in it, and it was pretty obvious then that this was the same person. So
except for the fact that last year Censor was trying to get her to name her kid after Censor.
True.
That sounds like Censor. That's funny. Oh, I love that.
I think one of the things that stuck out to me on this trip is we had a number of, so at the beginning of the trip, our team split up. And so we had 3 people, Zach, AJ, and Taryn, go to a different region, Nimba. And the rest of us stayed in the clinic area that Infantile, where we were based. And in 2 days, we collectively treated over 400 people in the first 2 days of the trip. And so I just think it's incredible to think that, that's how the trip started. And all of these patients, for the most part, were each prayed for. Every single family was prayed for. And I just think that was really powerful. Another thing that stuck out to me, I think, this year is we had a number of sick kids that had really severe issues, from pneumonia to cerebral malaria, coming in basically lifeless. And I to my recollection, we did not, through the grace of God, we did not have at least a child die in the clinic. From what I recall, and I think Zach and AJ agree. And so I think that God's healing touch was just on that we didn't have to deal with that this year. And I think that was just his provision over the team and over the people, and just the power of his healing.
I got 2 questions. So to a non-medical person like myself, what's the range? Like, this is a clinic. What kind of medical help are you giving in this clinic? Like, give me like the range of like what type of what kind of patients do you see, and what kind of work do you do? And then I guess the second question that comes alongside that is, what, I guess, you said you went to this other town and you were able to give some medical help over there. Is this, do they have a lot of access to healthcare? Like, are there other options they have? I feel like I understand a little bit of the culture there just from some of the stories, but help walk this through, like in terms of how many options they have when you show up. What is that like for them as when they're coming to you?
Censor, do you want to answer about like kind of the first part of the question, and then also pictures as far as like the NIMBA and that part?
Yeah. So in terms of the spectrum, it's everything. And so it's neonatal, like literally newborns, deliveries, labor and delivery, to many procedures, to geriatrics and the elderly. And it's all tropical medicine of all critical levels. Asthmatics, people with dysentery, typhoid, malaria, people with like liver disease, lots of pregnant patients, and a lot of complicated medicine. And then one of the key aspects I think Zach will kind of go into is that we bring a number of donated supplies and medical equipment and things that are gathered, and so we each kind of limit our packing so that each of our checked bags are just filled with medical supplies.
Wow.
And Zach can kind of touch on the resources. It's really nothing. So.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot there. We're the only clinic where our main place is in Fendel. We're the only clinic for a good probably 8 to 10 miles because the next closest clinic closed in Mount Barkley. So there's there's not a whole lot of access there. Hospitals are very limited. You have to pay. And then where we went out the first 2 days, a couple of us, so we had to take roads like that. Can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we were on roads like that for several hours. Then we had to cross on a ferry. All right, so, and that wasn't the ferry. The ferry was a little boat. There's the little boat that they kept having to get water out of.
I can't believe you just called that ferry.
It wasn't a ferry. It was a
small dinghy. How about that?
Motorbikes on this ferry that's sinking.
Right. And then we got onto motorbikes to go the last hour into the jungle. So there's our crew of motorbikes right there.
This was the James Bond thing I was talking about earlier.
So then we got to this village, which there's obviously, you can see from the picture, there's nothing out there. We took all the medicine with us. I think we saw 160, 170 people. But it's everything there, from primary health care of oh, this old person has high blood pressure and it's definitely not controlled, to, we had some super sick twins, and twins over there, there's one of our twins that was pretty sick, pretty malnourished. Twins over there are not a blessing in the way that we think of it, because the mom doesn't have enough nourishment to actually feed both of these kids. So one usually gets bigger and one gets smaller and dies. But thanks to a donation that we got, we were able to bring formula, and we were like, oh, we should just bring some with us just in case. And thankfully we were able to leave some for her. So hopefully that helps to, get her through the next couple of months till the kids can actually start eating. But there's so little access out there. It's pretty jungle medicine.
It was really cool in that village too, especially to be able to do a lot of community health education, and there was just rampant typhoid everywhere, because there hadn't been a lot of teaching in that area because it's so removed and so remote, in the furthest part inward of the country, to just teach about clean and dirty water, and just I feel like so much of what we did in that village was just try and teach good health habits, because we were only going to be there for a day and then we were going to be leaving. And we could treat them today, but the typhoid would come back if we didn't actually teach them good health habits. And they have so little access to researching that or learning that on their own. So that was a really cool opportunity just to get back to basics of community health and medicine, and not be so wrapped up in doing all the intensive treatments that sometimes we do, and just remember that a lot of what we can do is just teach good health habits, and that is just as important.
Well, I want to particularly just acknowledge Katie and Tara. just, I know while you guys were overseas, this whole world that we're in right now with COVID-19 kind of was breaking when it was ramping up very quickly while you were overseas, and got a chance to check in on particularly Katie and Tara while you were over there, and just both of you exemplifying faith and just being incredibly strong women of faith. Pretty cool to get to watch you two ladies. For a lot of times, especially with short-term trips, when one spouse goes and the other stays back, there's always it's a whole team thing. Families do this together. It's not just the person that's on the ground, but it's a whole family. And so both you women were extraordinary in seeing through that moment, and also just exemplifying faith and being a part of that team as well, even from home. So thank you and well done to that. I want to make sure I acknowledge you guys. That's a silent clap, but I think Tara could hear that clap, but the rest of us. With that, and I want to make sure we stay to, I'm going to try to close this by 8:00, so I want to keep track of our time here. But I think that's an important part of this trip's story, is that kind of while you were there, this new world that we're all in right now was ramping up quickly. I know Travis and myself and Dave Childers were supposed to meet you out there, and we were ready to go until just about the last minute. When we, it ramped up really quickly there, we decided to stay back. But how did that impact your trip? What did you see the Lord do through all of that? And can you just kind of speak into that a little bit from your perspective?
Fair. Well, when we were sitting at the table at dinner, and that's whenever like we talk, because I feel like things get so crazy during the day. At dinner is when we talk. And Zach and Spencer were like, we could be here until tomorrow, or we could be here for another 8 days, because I think this was Saturday or maybe Friday. And literally that morning, I'm not a morning person, and in my mind I was like, okay, you have 4 more sleeps and then you can go home. But then when Zach said that we could be staying longer, I was like, okay, I can stay longer. I can do it. This is gonna be great. And then we went to clinic, and in my mind I had already resolved. I was like, all right, I've got 4 Cliff Bars left. I'm gonna make it. This is gonna be great. We're gonna be here longer. This is awesome. So that was a nice day, until then we moved our day to leave earlier. And I was surprised that I was sad that we were gonna leave earlier, because this is my 3rd time going, and Mariah had shared earlier, a lot of the little girls remembered my name, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize you remember my name. And so relationships have been built with the people at the clinic and in the community. And I just think the Lord is pressing on my heart. He's like, I want you to go, and I want you to go longer next time. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. Just because just the relationships that we've built there, it's I care about these people, and I care about their well-being.
There's a part of your heart that's there now, isn't there?
Yeah.
Good. Anybody else want to share on this question, or you don't?
Why don't you share about the flights?
Me?
Mariah.
Oh, Mariah.
Sorry, I missed that you said my name. So yeah, I guess just pure miracle that we even got to go. The day after we landed, Liberia put up a travel ban for anybody who was traveling with over 200 cases. So if we would have arrived one day later, we would have probably been banned or been quarantined in a Liberian hospital for 14 days. So just huge blessing that we even made it there. And then I just really think the Lord's provision, just over all the prayers I know of
park parade as a whole, and our leaders, we decided to come back one day earlier. And I just think like that weekend, like if we would have left earlier, like I know for a fact O'Hare was a mess. We heard like lines for 6 hours. We landed in Chicago and we got through customs in 20 minutes. So that was a huge blessing. And then we found out like the next day that Brussels Airlines, we flew on Brussels Airlines, that they were canceling like all of their flights. So I just really think like definitely like the Lord's provision that we went, that we got to go, and then that we made it back safely and when we did.
Yeah, I love hearing that. It's really cool on this end, just to know the amount of prayer that was going on for you guys, both from the members of the church, but then we had on one of those nights, we had an all elders meeting and just spent time as all the elders praying for you guys. And just to hear the timing of that, like, back to back, it's pretty neat how the Lord got you home, but allowed you to be there as long as you needed to be, to see those patients and to make an impact while you were there. So pretty cool. What I would like to do, I have 2 more questions. And one thing I want to do, I want to give Zach a chance to share some photos. And I think you've learned how to screen share, so you don't have to hold the photos up to your camera. Not that that's bad, but I think this might be better. So Zach, go ahead and give it a shot. And if you could, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll switch back. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. And then anybody just jump in if you want to. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Okay, well, I can't share my screen.
Here, I'll make you the host. Hold on.
Perfect.
Zoom. Oh boy. I know I can do this. Hold on.
We believe in you.
Stop video. No, don't do that.
Rafe, I did email you the folder of photos. If that could be our plan B.
Okay. Wait, let me try this. Oop. No. All right, one more second. Not breakout rooms. That would be wrong. Okay, I'm going to look at my email real quick and try to pull that up. I'm sorry, Zach. Hold on.
No, it's all good. Unmute yourself, Katie. Oh, she's saying from upstairs, I can hear her. Are there any other stories or takeaways?
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Let's try this. Share. Can you all see?
That's what you picked?
That is not Liberia.
Okay.
Me and Spencer buying snacks for the trip.
Okay. I did not compile the album. I'm just scrolling through the album. So I'm going to scroll through every few seconds, and then someone who's talking, you tell me when to stop.
That's our team. Let's keep going.
Team.
I don't know if this is a good idea.
Yeah, right there. There's like 600 of them. Maybe go to like the tile view. And
there you go.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Okay,
it's
the
all
clinic.
pictures.
So this is the
loading
clinic?
bags onto the car. All right, there's the clinic.
Okay.
That's the OB room. So if you want to give birth, that's where you get to give birth.
This room is the give birth
Yes.
room?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there a technical term for the give birth room that we should know? Or just the
OB.
give birth room?
The OB room.
Okay. This is there at the airport, I'm assuming?
Yes, that's when we arrived.
Okay.
Okay, that's Stan's Donuts when we're going to Nimba.
Oh, okay.
Where?
Yeah.
That guy right there, his name is Stan.
Oh. Right here?
Yes.
This is the road you were sharing before. Now, what's this
That is
building
the road. That's the clinic in Fendel. That's where we usually go to. That's where
This
we
is
spend
the
the
clinic.
majority of our time. Yeah.
And what's this building over here?
That is Katie, that's the preschool, right?
It's so cute. Their little faces stare out that window. It's so precious.
What, right here?
Mm-hmm. And the window goes all the way around the whole thing. It's precious.
All right. So, and these are the children in the school?
Yep, those are the kiddos.
Oh, such a great picture.
There's Sensor with his terrible wound.
Oh, all right. Is there a story with
Bandaged
this?
for like 2 days. He doesn't have a scar.
Okay.
Yeah.
You would think
I
that
do
that
have a
was a
scar.
massive
Yeah.
wound.
See the scar now.
This was like Monday. Sensor went to go like get lunch or something. He comes back to the clinic and I was like, dude, you're bleeding. And then he's like, oh, really? Can you put like a Band-Aid on it? And I was like, what did you do? He's like, I walked into a door. And I was like, bad. But he's fine, I think.
Just a small scar.
So, are these teachers in the school?
Yeah, those are the teachers that I did my workshop with.
Love this.
Yeah.
Is that how you got the injury? No, Band-Aid's already on there. And what's this?
That's the waiting area.
To get into the clinic.
Mm.
Yeah.
This is
That's the ferry that we had to take, that small little blue boat right there.
This
Right
is
there, okay.
Mark. That's Mark right
That's
there.
Mark.
That's like the head of LEM.
he's the what?
He's
The
the
head
director.
of LEM, the ministry.
Okay. Oh, is this who is in Chicago?
Yeah.
Yeah, you met him.
Oh, okay. Look at these pictures. You got some great pictures here.
Some of these are graphic.
Yeah, I was gonna click, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna get queasy if I do that. But these are great pictures. Is there anywhere I should scroll to specifically?
I think this is a good overview. I mean, it just shows like some of the sick kids and
The puppy.
A puppy.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing. This is great. Let me put up one more picture here, maybe a good finisher here of you guys with all the folks out there. What a great picture. All righty. I'm going to stop sharing. Well, thank you all for coming on here. Two things. One is I just want to just acknowledge how great of a trip this is. And thank you to you guys for going, for making this trip possible, and for the relationships that you guys have built over there. It's pretty great. I shared before that I love those ministries where there's long-term relationships. And I feel like this particular trip really exemplifies that you guys have formed some deep, meaningful relationships. And frankly, even what's there now, that's so cool just to know it goes back to Katie and Zach and some work you did there when you were living there full time. And so really incredible, grateful for this. And there's a lot more work to do in the future. So this is not done. With our last few minutes here, I do want to just acknowledge that this trip is mostly, not everybody, but mostly the medical community. And you guys are front lines today in Chicago as well. And so is there anything particularly, I don't know if just maybe one person wants to share, how can your church be praying for you in the medical community right now, back here as we're dealing with COVID-19?
I would say that there are so many areas, I think, with anyone who's working in medicine to keep them in your mind and in your hearts in terms of prayer for just their health, their safety, their energy, that they're not getting burned out, that they feel supported and loved by the church. I think that there is, I think most people would agree that they go into medicine to serve and to use the gifts and talents that God gave them to help in hopes of getting people better from illness. But with this illness, it is really significant in terms of the effects that it has on people, and hospitals are overwhelmed. There are shortages of personal protective equipment, and people who are dealing with these patients are at a risk of getting the disease itself and then coming home to, their families or loved ones, or, it's always this baseline element of anxiety. And so I think praying, one, that God heals, that God is glorified, that our team feels and knows that God is present and in control in the midst of this chapter, but that ultimately people are pointed to Christ above everything else, because separation, being affected by the disease is not even close in comparison to being separated from Christ. And so having just the ultimate outlook on salvation, and that the people in the medical field would be able to preach that and steer people towards that as the source of hope, ultimately, I think, are things to just keep in mind.
Wow. That's really helpful. Thank you, Sensor. I almost called you Zach. Thank you, Sensor. Hey, to the team, thank you all so much. You guys are much appreciated. I'm so glad that you're home safe, that you got home and that you were able to do the work you were. And so thank you for being on this tonight. To everyone else who tuned in, I hope this was a blessing to everyone who was able to be on here. To whoever's watching this after the fact and kind of tuning in and learning a bit more about this team and the work they were able to do, I hope this blesses you as well. And with that, thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.